Welcome into Lombardi's Legends podcast. I am Wags, and joining me as always is my co-host Dane here on a Sunday evening. So we are live on our YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook channels. So if you join us here, please feel free to pop into our chat, say hello, let us know how the Packers are doing in free agency, and any other thoughts and questions that you have here as we continue on in the off season. Dane, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing well, Wags. I'm doing well. I'm feeling good about where the Packers are at. I think free agency wise, I think just getting right into it. I think the big news sometimes is who leaves the team too. Zadarius Smith, a bit of an about face, went from the Ravens and had a deal in place, it sounds like, and ends up going to the Minnesota Vikings instead. What's your impression of that? Obviously, we're going to miss those sacks last season. The injury bug bit him. He wasn't able to play for the Packers, but still a loss for the team to not have that third rusher. And certainly for the Vikings, it's a big addition for them, I think. And the Vikings continue their tradition of poaching former Green Bay Packers to be part of their defense.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really think too much about it, to be honest, Dane, because if the Vikings don't add Zadarius Smith, they're probably going to go after a different pass rusher. So it's not like they're not going to have anybody lined up at the edge position. And Zadarius, as we saw, can be very productive, and he's coming off an injury last year. So the Packers, we knew we were moving on from him. So hey, I'd rather he's not in Minnesota, but the way I look at it, if it's not Zadarius Smith, it's someone else. So it doesn't really affect me one way or the other. The other guy that signed in Minnesota, it hurt a little bit more just because of our personal connection. Chandon Sullivan, certainly folks are probably aware, moved over to the Vikings as well. And he's probably the only Vikings player that I will ever wish well, just because he's a solid dude. And he came on our podcast a few times over the last few off seasons. So we're not cheering for him when he's playing the Packers, but certainly wish him well. And it's too bad he wasn't able to come back, but that's the way this business works. The Packers clearly had some priorities. They prioritized Rasul Douglas. Completely understand that coming off of last season. And obviously, they have to feel like they need to budget certain positions. And with that secondary that they have, we said Rasul Douglas would be a little bit of a luxury. I think Chandon Sullivan got to the point where he might have been a little bit of a luxury too, considering he would have been relegated unless there's injuries to more of that dime type role to be out on the field. So his snap count may have gone down a little bit. So I get why they decided to go in another direction. And Chandon just needed a job. So I can't blame the guy for going and finding a spot. But anyway, so certainly a couple former Packers now in Minnesota. So Dane, did you have any other thoughts on those moves, or anything
No,
else to add yourself on Zadarius Smith?
not on either of those two. I think Zadarius, it's fine. That's life. That's free agency. We'll see if he's able to bounce back for the Vikings or not. But I like the guys we have up front. I was a little disappointed that Billy Turner, we let him go, able to go over and sign with the Denver Broncos. I mean, again, we knew that we were going to lose some guys with the cap situation we're in. But the Packers, I didn't feel like saved that much money. So you've got to wonder if Billy was also ready to move on or not. I don't know, right? I don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but I sure would have liked to have seen Billy Turner remain in Green Bay as things now shake out. No knock on the guys we have. We love the guys we have here, but you can just never have too much depth. And now Billy goes to where Luke Getsy is over there in Denver, and Denver gets I think a pretty good offensive lineman.
Yeah, for sure. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about the guys the Packers did bring in? First of all, this past week, early in the week, Jaren Reed, defensive lineman, former Seattle Seahawks, spent a year in Kansas City. Dane, what do you know about this guy, and what were your impressions of this move? There was not a costly signing, but could be kind of a upside signing, I think, for Green Bay, short-term contract, and someone that perhaps could help us on that defensive line.
Yeah, I actually really like the signing. The more that I thought about it and the more I looked into his body of work, I'd heard of him before, but real talk, it wasn't somebody that I had tracked entirely over the course of his career, but he's played a lot of football. And the defensive line position notoriously is one where it oftentimes takes guys a year or two to really develop out of the draft. And the fact that the Packers were able to go get a veteran guy like him to come in, I really like it. And Wags actually, he's solid against the run, but he's a very, very effective pass rusher on the inside. And it reminded me, the Packers were never really able to replace Kingsley Keke near the end of last season on the line. And I feel like this signing really kind of fits that role there, but it also gives Kenny Clark yet another guy to help. We both have talked ad nauseum. We think TJ Slayton's going to take a jump as a young guy, but to bring in another veteran as part of a defensive line rotation, I really, really like this signing. These are the kind of savvy signings that Goody seems to be able to do and bring guys in. So I'll be curious to see the impact that is made as the season progresses, but on the surface, I really like the signing. I like the cost, and I like the impact that this guy can make for this defensive line.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. I think you hit it on the head. I was going to say the Kingsley Keke role, but actually, we'd have some known production. Kingsley Keke had his moments, but wasn't the most consistent, especially the last couple of seasons. And I thought had some potential. And unfortunately, in Green Bay, obviously, we saw that potential went untapped. Where I think Jaren Reed, a little bit of a more of a known commodity at this point in his career, certainly isn't going to be someone you expect to pop out and have Pro Bowl level production, but you never know. As we saw last offseason, you can bring someone in and hopefully they can just fit schematically. And I don't expect him to get 10 and a half sacks like he did back, I believe, in 2017 with Seahawks. But if he can be, like you said, Dane, solid against the run and give you some moments to pass rush, he could be causing some problems or disruption next to Kenny Clark in a way that we haven't seen in a couple of seasons. So this could be a big time help. Obviously, we expect TJ Slayton also to be someone that will continue to develop in his second season, maybe get some more snaps. And I wouldn't be surprised, Dane, if the Packers are active in the draft and add another guy on the defensive line in the draft as well, maybe fairly early on. So this is a big time opportunity to both hedge against the rookie and TJ Slayton coming in his second year, as well as just perhaps even significantly improve the overall talent across this defensive line, both with the signing of Jaren Reed as well as whatever else the Packers want to do in the draft as well.
Yeah. Wags, another signing right after the Shandon Sullivan departure, Keyshawn Nixon, the Packers are able to bring in. And I know the second half of this pod today, we're going to talk a little bit more broadly about special teams, but a guy who has been part of Rich Bisacchia's special teams for the last couple of years over there for the Raiders. I thought that this was a really interesting signing, kind of guy that we like, undrafted guy, has hustled, has worked his tail off, has earned snaps, mostly on special teams, but a guy who kind of has played that Isaac Yiadom role over the past years. He's been a gunner on punt return. He's kind of an up back on kick return, but does a little bit of everything on special teams. So interesting right away that I think that Bisaccia is getting a guy that he has comfort with coming into the special teams unit. And now he's got a chance to go out there and try to earn a roster spot as well.
Yeah, I think so as well. And he's maybe on the fringe to make this team. He's an unsigned guy out of South Carolina back in 2019, but he's on the Raiders last 3 seasons, led the Raiders in kickoff special team stops in his rookie season back in 2019. So Bisaccia, clearly, this is a guy he had some familiarity with. He said, you know what, let's bring them in here to compete. So I think special teams, we say it a lot. That's the way that some of these guys that are going to be kind of lower on the depth chart, especially in that cornerback position group, can have a route to making this team. So I'm excited if Coach Bisacchia believes this is someone that could help this special teams unit. He's got the familiarity with them, and certainly was not a costly addition. So certainly not a lock to make this 53-man roster, but could be another one of those hidden gems that's going to be competing in camp, and we'll see if he can help us out here down the road.
Yeah, and finally, I mean, should we mention Pat O'Donnell? Punter comes in as well. We learned that earlier this offseason that Bojorquez was not going to be coming back, and the Packers go out and they take Pat O'Donnell, who's been punting for the Bears for the last 8 seasons. And this is, I think, another tip that the Packers are going to put some priority towards the special teams, and maybe I'm not going to say they haven't in the past, but early on in the offseason, making a signing like this, they're trying to solidify some of these position groups, I think, pretty quickly. And doing a little digging on Pat O'Donnell, I mean, he's a guy who I think a key and something that you've talked about in the past, the Packers always seem to draft guys or assign undrafted guys that punt in warm weather. Pat O'Donnell for the last years has been punting down there in Chicago in the cold. He's also a holder. He also has experience on kickoffs. So, somebody that comes in here and kind of fills some of the roles that are needs for this Packers team. And based on the structure, Wags, of the contract, it looks like he's at least guaranteed a spot this year after getting, I think, $1.6 million guaranteed his first year. The Packers aren't cutting that punter, I don't think. So I think Pat O'Donnell is going to be the Packers punter at least in 2022.
Yeah, it would certainly appear so. Were you surprised that Borges wasn't someone the Packers had interest in coming back, or was that just one of those, well, we'll see what happens, not really strong feelings one way or the other? Or what was your read on that, Dane?
I was okay with it. I mean, if you would have told me October 15th that the Packers wouldn't have had interest in bringing Bojorquez back, I would have been like, what happened? But we kind of saw what happened. When the weather went south, his punting just wasn't up to par. Certainly not the major problem on special teams every week in and week out, but the reliability and those big booming punts went away. So I think the Packers saw an opportunity to upgrade or at least find some consistency. And Pat O'Donnell seems to be a guy who over the course of his career has been able to stick on one team and has been able to punt through the elements. And that's something this Packer team needs. Do you agree or do you disagree? Are you surprised by Bojorquez?
No, I think let's hold that thought a little bit, because I have some additional thoughts on Pat O'Donnell and why the Packers may have wanted to make a move there as well. So let's save that for the second half. First, Dane, why don't we talk about our sponsor, DraftKings Sportsbook, official sports betting partner of the NFL. And of course, it's basketball season now, so we've got March Madness going on, NBA regular season's winding down here. Dane, I know you've been keeping us up to date on your wife Andrea's DraftKings moves, so to say, in daily fantasy. How's she doing in March Madness, man? I mean, I'm excited to hear how she's been able to cash in.
Greg's, I mean, can I admit to the audience here that she might be rooting for Duke at this point, which is bonkers. I never thought that would be the case, but she's having a lot of fun with it. I'll admit that I don't know if we're the biggest basketball fans in this household. We're casual basketball fans, but because of the DraftKings Sportsbook app, she uses promo code TPPN. Again, the promo code TPPN. She used this promo code WAGS, and now she's into March Madness. She's into the NBA, all sorts of sports outside of football. And it's because it's so easy to place bets and it's a lot of fun. It makes these games that much more fun. So again, DraftKings Sportsbook, please folks, use promo code TPPN and join the fun with March Madness. The Final Four is almost upon us.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. Bet $5 on any college hoops team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. If they win, you win with promo code TPPN this week at DraftKings Sportsbook. 21 plus, restrictions apply. See show notes for details. All right. So, Dane, talking a little bit more about Pat O'Donnell then.
Yeah.
What do you think his role as a holder in Soldier Field the last few seasons, and you mentioned kickoffs as well,
Yeah.
had to do with this move? Because clearly we saw that field goal was a big part of Packers ranking dead last in special teams by DVOA. They were the worst in the league on field goal and extra point. Mason Crosby struggled. Some of that was on Mason Crosby, no doubt about it. Some of it was on the snaps. Some of it was on the hold. So is this one way potentially for the Packers to try to at least shore up the operation? And then it's on Mason to be consistent and get back to that level where he can be executing at a very high level as well.
I think so. I mean, that's a really good point, Wags. And I always think, punter, I'm thinking about them, booming punts out of the back of their own end zone. But the holding position, as we've learned, is exceedingly important to what the Packers are doing. And it was just sloppy last year across the board. I mean, Packers went through two different long snappers, which, I don't remember the last time that happened. And I'm not sure if Steve Wirtle was any better, than Hunter Bradley was. So that was kind of a mess of a situation. And then Bork, as we saw a couple times, just struggled to get the ball down, struggled to get the laces out. But what the heck are you going to do? This is a role where you can't really be making these switches mid-season all that often for a punter. So, it's a good point that you're making. Pat O'Donnell is a true professional, and he's a guy who's very good at getting the ball down. He's a veteran who's done it for a number of years. So knock on wood, this helps solidify some of this. I mean, what we don't want, Wags, is to be going into this camp with a bunch of question marks with the punting situation again, right? I mean, I feel like we've had this the last couple of years. Now's the time. I feel like under the Matt LaFleur era, the one glaring hole we've seen, he's been phenomenal most of the time here for the Packers, but special teams has been a weak point since he's been the head coach of the Packers. And frankly, prior to him coming to Green Bay as well, we've had a lot of rough years at special teams. So maybe this is the year that the coaching staff, at the very least, they're trying to identify solutions early on in the offseason. And I admire them for that. Now, Pat O'Donnell's going to have to go out there and take care of business, but they signed him. I think that they have confidence in him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be coming to Green Bay. And I'm eager to try to get this stuff squared away immediately, because we can't have what just happened last season happen again. We can't have Groundhog Day over and over again at Lambeau Field.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where if there were easy answers on special teams, there would have been other coaches and obviously this front office could have figured this out. It's been a long-standing issue. Dane, based on what you've learned about Coach Bisacchia,
Yeah.
is there anything that stands out to you that might give Packer fans some hope or confidence that he might be the one that can finally fix some things on this special teams unit moving forward?
I mean, Wags, he has a ton of experience. So right away, I really like this about him. I've been kind of looking into him. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about production in this league. And I think we learned a lot about Rich Bisaccia this last season when he became the interim head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. It was telling that those guys were fighting tooth and nail for him, and clearly they liked playing for the guy. But that's all fine and dandy. But what I think really matters is the guy's been doing this for like 20 years in this league, and nearly half of the time he's been in the league, he's had a top 10 special teams unit. And even when he hasn't, and I got to give credit to Sports Illustrated, his units finished higher than the Packers in 14 of the past 16 seasons. So, he's doing something right. And I don't know what the X's and the O's are going to be, how he's going to shapeshift, but maybe he's just got a keen eye for talent, Wags, and guys that fit certain roles. And if that's the case, like game on, right? Because I think the Packers have the athletes to play special teams. Now, can Bisacchia get the most out of them? He's clearly been able to do it across his other stops in the NFL. And I'm just hopeful that that hot streak continues in Green Bay.
Yeah, and I just kind of when you look at the team's unit, certainly we said Mason Crosby and the field goal extra point dead last. And season before that, Mason didn't miss any field goals. I think he missed one or two
Right.
extra points. So that's sort of a head scratcher. Obviously, that wasn't something that we would have expected to see coming. But going back to Pat O'Donnell potentially helping as a holder, do you think that the Packers are going to bring in some competition for Steven Wardle as well?
Yeah.
Certainly isn't something that we have to invest a lot of resources, both financially or draft capital, into finding a long snapper. But or is there a veteran out there that you think the Packers might try to pick up on the margins? Problem is, there's not a lot of long snappers. They tend to stick if they're good on teams forever. But I think, Dane, that seems apparent that would be another part of the operation that this front office is going to want to look at as well.
Wags, I mean, tell me what you think, but I don't know if Steve Wordle even makes it to camp. I really don't. I mean, I just think that the Packers, they got to look at what he did last season. And I thought that mixed results. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. It's just what it is. I'm wondering if the Packers bring somebody in. You can only hold so many of these roster spots for special teams guys. And right now the Packers are carrying 3 kickers and a punter and a long snapper. I mean, how many roster spots can you hold? Now, I also don't know if the Packers are carrying 3 kickers heading into camp. That's a whole different story. But at a certain point, I think they're going to be identifying talent. I imagine, Wags, they've got to have some eyes on some of the guys coming out of the draft as well. And just wouldn't be surprised at the very least for competition, or if somebody comes in and outright is the guy until proves otherwise. And I think we're going to probably see a change of face at the long snapper going into this year.
Yeah, for sure. Dane, I do want to ask you, and I know there's not any immediate answers, so I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No.
But looking at our return units, those are 2 other units that really struggled. Punt return, dead last, kick return, second to last. How much, starting with the kickoff return, how much do you ascribe that to Kylin Hill getting hurt early in the season? Because I'll tell you what, I thought for kickoff return, he was showing some flashes, and obviously a big body, he's got speed. With kickoff, you don't normally want the punt return. You can have different body types back there, but a lot of times you want a little bit more of that bruiser, which Kylin Hill is, get a little head of steam and can pick up the extra yards, bounce off a tackle or two. Do you feel like, and we don't know how healthy Kylin will be, but by all accounts, he should be ready to go going into next season. Do you feel like just having him back could help a lot, or is there additional schematic or personnel moves that the Packers or Coach Bisacchia might need to do to tweak things a little bit for the kickoff return?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Kylin Hill, it's such a astute observation. The Kylin Hill injury was a huge gut punch. I mean, we saw Kylin in preseason. He looked electric. I mean, folks, go back and listen to the first couple weeks of our episode 1, 2, and 3 of this past season of our podcast, and you're going to hear me saying I think he's going to take some touches from Aaron Jones or AJ Dillon, or at least mix him in and find a way to get him involved. That's how highly I thought of Kylin last season until the injury occurred. But I'm hopeful that he's able to get back, and he is his former self by the time camp rolls around. You never know how long it takes for guys to get 100% back. But Wags, schematically, I don't know what the difference really is going to be here. But I do think that Coach B is going to be able to identify the talent that needs to be out there. And I also think that he has the capacity to adjust in a way that I don't know we necessarily were able to do as much last season. We've seen Bisacchia a time over the course of his career make adjustments at halftime, make adjustments as seasons progress. And that's something that I think is sorely missing last season. And that is a welcome addition here in Green Bay.
Yeah, and you look at the Raiders last season, they were certainly not one of the top special teams units, but some of that can be talent, and obviously he was dealing with quite a bit of personnel issues there, both
Right.
in the coaching staff and on the team in Las Vegas. So it's hard to blame him for anything that went on, and they were able to hold things together incredibly well. One thing that does stand out when you look at Raiders and special teams units is punt coverage was really good. They were top 10 in the league in punt coverage. And that's one of those units that can really be a backbreaker, Dane, if you don't have solid coverage, both in protection and in coverage.
Tell me about it, Wags.
Unit. Yeah, we don't need to explain why, but certainly I think that's encouraging. That's an area that at least for last year, the Raiders were very, very solid. So you have to figure that he can shore some things up there pretty well. You've got Pat O'Donnell back there to punt. He has not gotten as many punts blocked as Borges has, even though he's been in the league almost twice as long. So some of that's on coverage and some of that's on the punter. So I think both from a personnel and then obviously the snapper, as you said. So there's going to have to be a two-pronged effort here. It's not just going to be the coach coming in and fixing all the problems. Certainly he's going to have some input, and I think already has had some input, as you can see with this signing of Keyshawn Nixon. So I'm excited to see what he can do there. Again, the biggest difference for overall ratings with this special teams is if Mason Crosby can get back on track, because it seems like unless something changes and he decides to retire here post draft or kind of go upcoming in the next couple of months, and that's still a possibility. We've got 3 kickers on the team right now, Dane, that it's going to be Mason's job because they haven't made any move to release him. They could save about $3 million if he's a post June 1st cut. Or if he designates himself to retire. I don't see Mason, having to get cut. That's being handled as Mason's just retiring, right? So, so we'll see what happens there. But that's the single biggest thing. So, one other thing I want to ask you about then, Dane, punt return. I know that we've said over the last few seasons, can we just fair catch the ball and not fumble and just get Aaron Rodgers and the offense out there? And that seemed to almost be the strategy for most of at least the second half of the season last year. But we've seen that getting some positive yards can be a real boon for, whether it's for the offense to go down and score or just to get field position. It can make a big difference. So Amari Rodgers, Dane, he certainly isn't going to be handed the job as far as I'm concerned as a return man. So that's mostly a personnel thing that needs to be addressed, in my opinion. How do you think the Packers do that? Just do the draft, or is there some moves that they might be able to make still in free agency to help with the return game from punt returns as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of options out there. And Lee86 commenting, interesting guy in the draft is Marcus Jones. Could be the best return man this draft, plays slot corner, always around the ball. Options, right, Wags? I mean, it's about options. And I thought last year in one game, David Moore probably looked better than Amari did over the course of the entire season. Unfortunately, I think Amari Rodgers, I don't think that experiment's entirely done yet. But I also, to your point, I don't think that he's getting handed this job whatsoever. Could the Packers sign a receiver, a veteran receiver, somebody like a Keenan Cole? Is still out there. Jaguars guy who we saw him take one back to the house against the Packers when he played for the Jags a few years ago. If somebody like that comes into Green Bay, maybe two birds with one stone, right? You're getting a veteran wide receiver and somebody who returns punts. I'm not advocating for it. I'm saying, though, that that's a possibility. I think there's a lot of options on the table as this wide receiver group shakes out or through the draft. But Wags, I got to think they're going to have 2-3 guys competing in camp. Unless they go out and just get somebody to solely do returns, which I just, that doesn't seem to fit the Packers MO. But I do expect them to have a lot of competition in camp and to try to really zero in on somebody early on. And I've got to think Bisacchia yet again is going to have a fair amount of input. The Packers did not bring him in to Green Bay and pay him what they're paying him to not have input over the special teams roster position. And particularly, I do think in that return spot, that was a sore spot for the team last season. And I think they're going to shake every tree they possibly can. And we're going to come out better for it for the first game of the year. I just don't know if it's free agency or the draft. We're going to need to see how this receiver position plays out, I think, before we have a clearer picture there.
Yeah, and if they use one of their first round picks on a wide receiver, they're just going to get the best guy that can play on the outside. They're not going to be concerned about whether he can return. It's not a rule, but the punt returner tends to come from the wide receiver or cornerback group. And so I really think that there's a good chance the Packers use 3 selections on receivers. And they're going to be active on the undrafted free agency market with receivers as well to build a lot of competition. So I think later on in the draft, particularly once you get into the 3rd round or later, it's not going to be drafting based on need. It's can he play receiver? And oh, by the way, he's got this skill set as a return man. And so once you get down lower in the draft, you can target guys like that. And so I think the Packers are going to be bringing in several guys. I'll tell you what, Dane, I don't want to put extra pressure on Amari Rodgers, but I'm not so sure that he's guaranteed to make this roster at all, let alone be a return man. So I'm certainly not going to give up on him. We've seen some wide receivers take a little bit longer to develop. So hopefully he can come back and take a big jump here in year 2 on both levels. We could use him as a wide receiver and a return
We're
man.
rooting for him, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But he hasn't shown enough to me to say, all right, he's on the team. He's going to have to compete. That's just the fact of the matter. There's going to be a lot of new faces in that wide receiver group and in the return man group. So I think that's going to be addressed mostly through the draft. I don't expect that that's going to happen through free agency. Just when you're looking at who maybe the Packers sign as a free agent and the wide receiver group, more than likely they would want to get a more veteran guy. And I don't see any of those guys that are out there as real likely to be a return man for punts, but I guess you never know. Dane, any other thoughts just when you're looking at special teams in general? It seems almost simplistic with some of these things, but even though they haven't been major moves, I do like that the Packers are clearly being proactive from a personnel standpoint. And Coach Bisacchia has been studying the film and breaking down the tape and finding his guys. So it's going to be, I think, one other thing just in general, this is kind of a cliche, but they need to improve the speed on their coverage units in particular. And coverage wasn't terrible last year. Protection wasn't great, but coverage was not terrible on punt or kickoff. Believe it or not, it was solid. Those were probably the best areas of special teams last year. But I do think that they need to improve the overall level of speed, especially on the outside in both of those units as well.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. And we don't know how this is going to shake out, but I've got to say that I am inspired by the front office clearly putting a priority on trying to fix this and fix this quickly. It's something that needed to be done. It's very costly. You cannot have the special teams blunders that the Packers had last season and expect them to go deep in the playoffs. And we saw what happens when that stuff kind of happens. So I'm glad the front office recognizes it. They're not too prideful. Hopefully it's a fix and we're able to move forward and we can win some more football games.
Awesome. So, Dane, any other thoughts on special teams? I think we're going to try to keep this pretty short episode tonight, but
Yeah.
I want to make sure you got everything out there that you wanted to get out there. Any predictions early on, or is that a little bit too soon to jump into that?
Oh, it's too soon for me, Wags. We'll see how it goes. The Packers lost Oren Burks to the San Francisco. I expect Ty Summers to step up even more and be an absolute stud this year on special teams. And I think that he and a number of other guys are going to just rise to the challenge this year. And that's the expectation that we have.
For sure. So, okay, folks, thanks so much for joining us. We know the Oscars is going on, but hey, I just want to throw this out there. It's called Two Screens. So yes, you can tune us, and I gotta say, I'd rather talk Packers than watch the Oscars anyway myself. So, thanks so much as always. Be legendary and go Pack,
Go Pack, go.